Hello and welcome to this session. This session is in continuation to a series of sessions that we are having on how to create your first Android application. The Android application that we are trying to create is a fully functional e-commerce application, which is like your typical Amazon.com application. If you want to have a glimpse of how the final application looks like, there is a video in the same playlist. I would request you to go ahead and have a look at it. That will help you understand what is the final goal we are trying to achieve. Now, in the previous sessions, what we have done is we have created a very basic hello world application, and then in the next session what we have tried to do is convert that hello world activity into a splash screen, and in the backend through an asynchronous task, what we are trying to do is we are trying to fetch the details of the city list from the server. Now in this particular session, what we are trying to achieve is basically to give an option to the user to select the default city of his choice. Now this city screen dot activity will only get called on the first time login of the user, that is immediately after the application has been installed on the mobile. On all subsequent logins, because the user has already selected the default city, we will take the user directly from the splash screen to the home screen. The first thing that we are going to do is to create a layout for this particular screen. So we go to the rest folder and we go to layout. If you look at it, I have already created an XML called activity underscore city underscore screen. For you to create a new XML, all you have to do is right click on layout, go to new, go to others, and here select XML as a file option, and then you can put the name of the file and a new XML will get created. Because I have already created the XML, I am going to cancel this process right now, and I will take you directly to this particular XML. Now if you look at it, it is a very simple relative layout where I have defined the background color as the same as the color of the splash screen, and then there are two elements here. One is a text view and one is a spinner. Now the text view is just a static text which will tell the user to select the city. So it just displays select city for the user as a header for the spinner. Now the next widget that is available here is a spinner widget. Now what is a spinner widget? It is nothing but a drop down option which is available for the user where they can go ahead and select any one item in the drop down. Now we have defined the spinner widget here where I have defined the margin, and I have also defined that because it is a relative layout, I have defined it to be placed below the select city text, which is the text view here. And I have also defined that the pop-up background or the drop-down background color should be a color which is a tinge of red. Now this is a very basic definition that I have done for the spinner. We will obviously have to put the code behind how to handle this. Now the spinner has two elements. One is just the basic spinner. Now we also need to create an XML for the drop-down. How the drop-down menu will look like, we also need to define it. So for that, we have created another XML file called spinner underscore item. Now we'll open this file. If you look at it, it is a very basic XML which just says that how each element of the spinner dropdown will look like. So how we have defined it is basically through a text view, and in the text view we have said that the size of that text in the dropdown should be 20 dip, and the gravity it should be left line, and the text color should be white. Now once these two definitions are done, we can now go ahead into our cityscreen.java. Again, all the source code is available on my blog, which is semicolon.blogspot.in. The link is available in the description below the video, so you can always go ahead and get the source code for reference. Now if we come to the cityscreen.java, what we will see is that we are starting off with initializing a variable for the SQLite database, and we are also initializing a variable for the spinner element. Now inside the onCreate method, what we are doing is, again, the first thing that we typically do is to associate the layout activity underscore city underscore screen that we have already created, which is here. We are going to associate this activity underscore city underscore screen with this particular activity called city screen. Now, the next thing that we have done is we have tried to create a typeface. Now, what is a typeface? A typeface is a style for with respect to the font that we should be using. When we are defining the typeface, we also need to place this book.ttf file, which is the font file, into our folder, which is here in the assets folder. We need to create another folder called fonts, and inside fonts we need to paste the book.ttf folder, the book.ttf file. I'll just rename this where the name is fonts. This is the section where we go ahead and initialize the action bar, and then we hide it. Again, because it is a screen which is the first couple of screens, we may not want to display the action bar for the user. So I have gone ahead and hidden it. If you feel that you need to display it, you can just hide this particular statement or comment it out. Now the next thing that we are trying to do is to open or create the database. Now again, there is a 100% chance that before we come to this activity, the database basket buddy would have got created, because the splash screen would have got called before this activity. But it is always a safe thing to do is to call the open or create database, because even if there is a problem, at least it will not throw an exception. And then what we are trying to do is, from the city list table, database table, we are trying to pull all the city names which are available there. Now in these two statements, what we have done is we have just initialized the text view element, which is the static text which is there. We are setting the typeface for that particular text view to the type, which is what we have defined here. So what we are doing here in this particular line is we are defining a string array whose name is city underscore name underscore db, and we are setting it as c.getCount, which will return the number of city names which were found in city list table plus 1. Now why we want this array to be of size 1 more than the number of cities which are available in the city list table, we will understand this later on. Now the next step we are doing is we are defining the first element of this array, the string array, as choose city. It is a fixed text that we are populating here. Then the next step is to rotate the cursor as many number of times as the number of rows it has returned, and move each of those rows, the data from each of those rows, into city underscore name underscore db. Now city underscore name underscore db has a list of all the cities which are there in city list, plus it also has choose city as the first element. Now do notice that we are starting the count from 1, because the 0 element has already been populated. So we are starting it from 1. So the first element will be choose city, and then the rest of the cities will come one after the other. The next step is to define an array adapter of type string, and what we are doing is we are passing the application context. Now this is the method to return the application context. Then mapping this array adapter to the spinner item XML. Now you remember that we prepared a separate spinner item XML. Now this is how each row within the dropdown or the spinner dropdown is going to look like. So here we are basically mapping this array adapter to the spinner item, and we are passing the city underscore name underscore db string array as a parameter for it. The next step is that we have already defined the city underscore spinner as a spinner widget. We are just mapping this particular widget to the spinner widget, which is already there in the activity underscore city underscore screen XML. And the last step is that we are setting the adapter for this spinner as the array adapter that we have defined here. The screen definition is complete now, and the screen should display the drop down with the valid values, and also it should display the text which is select city on the top of the drop down. Now what happens when the user selects any one particular city? We need to handle that. Now whenever in the spinner item any change happens, or when any user action happens, this particular method which is set on item selected listener gets called. Now we need to then define that if an item gets selected, what typically happens. We need to understand that. So this is that part of the code where we are handling what happens when the user has selected any particular item. Now this is where we face some challenge. The challenge is that by default, when the screen renders, the first element in the array adapter is going to be displayed by default on the spinner. So you remember that we have three cities, which is Delhi, Gurgaon and Noida. So the array adapter right now has four elements. One is choose city, the first one. Second is Delhi. Third is Gurgaon, and fourth is Noida. So by default, the element choose city, because it is the first element, will get selected in the spinner. Now this is where it becomes tricky, that the first initial selection also is considered as a on item selected action by the set on item selected listener. What happens then is that immediately when the screen renders, even before the user has actually taken any action on that drop down, because we are setting a default item for the spinner, this particular function will get called. So if we don't add that choose city element, what will happen is that it will take Delhi, because Delhi would have been the first element, then it would automatically take Delhi as the selection and then continue with the whatever we wanted to happen from the next screen onwards. It would proceed to the next screen even before the user has taken any action. So this is a problem. So how do we solve that? The way that we have handled this is that we have added another additional item called choose city, and then when this particular method gets called, which is on item selected, the first thing that we are checking is that if the parent at that particular position which has got selected is choose city or not. Now if it is choose city, then we are ignoring this particular action. We are saying that do nothing. Okay, only if it is any other element, or the user has selected any other item other than choose city, then only this else part of the code will get executed, and we can handle however we want to handle it. Now you notice that on item selected has certain parameters which are getting passed. One is the parent, which is basically the array list which is there. The second is the view. This is the view of that particular spinner. Third is the position. This is the position of the item which has got selected by the user. So it can be 0, 1, 2, 3 in our case. Now here, using parent dot get item at position and position, we are basically finding out what the name of the city which was selected by the user, and we are ignoring if it is choose city. Moving to the else part of the code, because the user has taken an action, what we are doing is we are taking that city name which has been selected by the user, and then we are just querying the user preference to see if a row already exists in the user preference table. Now if the row already exists, then this part of the code will get executed. What will happen is that we will take the city name and we will populate the user preference table with that particular city name. So the default city name for the user in the user preference table becomes the city name that has been selected by the user. And if a row could not be found in the user preference, then we are inserting a new row where we are putting the values that is there, and we are also populating the city name as a default city name. The next thing that we want to do is, which I have just commented out the code, but what we will do is once this action has been completed, we'll define a new intent where the host screen is the city screen and the next screen is the home screen, and we will call that particular activity, and obviously we are closing the SQLite connection, because otherwise it will throw an DB exception error, and then we are finishing this particular method. Now this is only a stub which is there, on nothing selected. We don't need to do much around this. And obviously the post create and the on resume on pause functions remain as it is. Now the next thing that we need to do is go to Android manifest, and because we have added a new activity, we also need to add this particular section of the code where we are defining how this activity will get invoked. So here we are defining the activity. We are saying that the name of the activity is city screen, and so this is slightly wrong. So the name of the activity is city screen, and the label is city screen, which we have defined in the string, which is here, the file which is here, strings. We have defined it here, and the orientation is portrait, and the launch mode is single task. So once this definition is done, there is one more thing that needs to be done. I'm just saving this and closing this. These are also done, so I'm just closing these elements, and I'm going back to source. And in the start screen, you remember that we had commented out the intents, because at that point of time city screen and home screen were not ready. So now what I'm going to do is, because city screen is ready, I will just remove this part of the code. Now it is giving me an error because the include files are not there, so I'm going to press a Control Shift O, which will include all the required classes into this particular project, and we are done. We are going to execute this particular project, and we are going to save all the elements. Is that it is giving an error message for permission denied for internet usage. So what we have missed out in the start screen is to add the permission for this in the Android manifest. So what we're going to do is basically go to Android manifest and add the required permissions for this application. So we come here and we add the required permissions. We do a save, and now let's run the project once more. Let's see how it behaves. I'll open the emulator. Yeah, so now that the data has got populated in the start screen, because the default city is not selected, it has called the city screen. Now if I press on this, you will see that the drop down opens up with the names of the cities that is there in the server. Now if you select choose city, you will see that nothing happens. We don't move ahead. If we select Gurgaon, because we have not defined the next step, the application finishes and it closes down. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please do not forget to press the like button. Also to subscribe to our channel for more such videos, and you can follow these videos to create your own first e-commerce Android application. Thank you.